So welcome to Traditions Training Tuesday. We appreciate everybody that's signing on here this evening. We're almost 900 people on tonight to listen to this valuable program we're going to listen to tonight. Once again, Traditions Training has made a decision, as a company to offer this free training out there to everybody that's having to suffer through this pandemic. And obviously, I even talked to some of our friends at PL Vulcan and just the amount of classes and training that's been canceled. We just wanted to get something out there, keep people engaged, keep people talking about fire department, keep people talking about fire. It's just so easy to spend 24 hours at work now and be worried about this pandemic and what's going on in the world. So we wanted to make sure that everybody keeps up on their fire skills. And we've had a good 3 classes the last 3 weeks with Chief Schultz and Donnie Fletcher, Dan and Doug, and obviously Sammy Hiddle last week. But we certainly have been looking forward to this particular class for a long time. Roger Steger, who's a Traditions training instructor, wanted to make sure that we knew that this class was out there and that Lieutenant Burchick was willing to present it. He's going to present it at FDIC this year. So he's going to get it out here to get some practice done. And so he's ready to present when he gets out there, when we finally get this thing rescheduled and ready to go. So we're going to I just want to, obviously, this has been a pretty interesting weekend. If anybody's seen anything about the LA City fire, I think everybody in the fire service world has probably been looking at that. There was a pretty good show last night on fire engineering where they actually did an interview with the ops chief. Obviously, he couldn't say very much, but an incredible fire. Man, it was crazy to watch. So all our thoughts and prayers are with the LA City Fire Department and all its injured members. I'm sure there's more than just the 9 that actually got burned and went to the hospital. I'm sure there's a lot more people that got hurt. So I want everybody to think about that. So tonight's presentation, this one kind of hits close to home for a lot of people in the Baltimore, Washington area. We're all pretty close to Howard County, Maryland. Actually, Dan and Doug started their careers in Howard County as firefighters there. So, Howard County is that little affluent county between Baltimore and Washington, and we were unfortunately they had a very, very tragic fire. And I'm not going to say any more about it. I'm going to introduce you to Lieutenant Burchick. Lieutenant Burchick was a member of the RIT team that evening. He'll explain that all during his presentation, and that's what we're going to kind of focus on. We're not here to talk about tactics. And Josh, please interrupt me when I say something wrong. We're not here to talk about tactics. We're not here to talk about command. We are going to talk about the building a little bit, but what's going to be important is what they did that particular night in the all-out effort to try to save Nathan Flynn, who was trapped in this fire. So we're going to let Josh take it over now. So Josh, I'm going to mute myself, and it's all you. And have a great show. It's going to be fantastic. Sad topic, but it's going to be good for the firefighters out there to hear the lessons learned and what you have to say about stress inoculation. So it's all yours, Josh.
Cool. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks to everyone spending their Tuesday night hanging out with us all. And I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing me because you don't need to see my ugly mug, but we're going to keep rocking here. I always like to start with this quote. This is probably one of my favorite quotes around. And I want this to be the general theme of the entire presentation. It's probably going to take me a couple minutes to kind of shake off the dust here and get into a good cruising speed. But this is, like I said, I want this to be the general theme. I feel like anything that we do in the fire service may culminate to one point, and that's kind of what happened to us. I know that if this call happened 10 years ago, earlier in my career, I would have felt and I would have reacted entirely differently. So we're going to be talking a lot of really hard stuff, but there's going to be some cool stuff in here too, some good data to pull, and hopefully we can all glean some things from it. But as Roger Steger said, there's a lot of upfront investment that had to take place to make this a successful, I'll say semi-successful operation. So I just want you to think throughout, what are you doing to keep up your end of the bargain and the expectations that are placed upon us? We don't want to become a liability. What are we doing personally, professionally? And does it lend itself to the success of our operation and of our teams? So just something to think about in the back of your mind as we progress through here. So All right, we're here because of Nate. We're here to honor Nate. Nate and I were classmates together, class 20 for Howard County Fire. You'll see there 9/30/05 on the bottom of his lid. That was our graduation date when we graduated the academy together. I kind of use firefighter and lieutenant interchangeably, so I apologize. He was a firefighter on Engine 101, which is our special ops house. He was passionately promoted to the rank of lieutenant after he suffered the line of duty death there on July 23rd of 2018. So we're here to honor Nate, his incredible wife Celeste, and their 5 children. So we're gonna get right into this. So I'm gonna give you just a really quick breakdown of what Howard County is. Hopefully we got some people all over the nation listening in. So just give you a quick rundown of what Howard County is. We're gonna spend most of the time talking about a brief overview of the incident, how this all took place, what actually happened. I'm going to build up throughout. We're going to spend time in the RID operation, and that's where my crew comes in. And then why I thought that we were successful in retrieving our fallen brother that night, and how we were able to make it out of there and overcome some of the obstacles that we encountered. So, yeah, I never know what to put here, man. I've been in the fire service since 2003. Started volunteering in my hometown. Volunteered from 2005 to 2011 in PG County as well. I got hired by Howard County in 2005. And yeah, my wife will tell you I've got too many hobbies. I don't have a bunch of letters behind my name. If you need to hear more about my street cred, I'm going to have to call in some favors before you start asking. So yeah, I'm just going to keep rocking. But Howard County demographics. So we're the second smallest county in the state of Maryland. We're right smack dab in the middle. If you're on our top end border, that blue star there, that's Baltimore City. The bottom star is the nation's capital. Some of our Elkridge boxes, the very north end, on the first due box assignment, we'll have some Baltimore City units on our first alarms. That's how close proximity we are. We are very affluent. We have some of the highest median income in the entire nation. But we also have some major thoroughfares. We have Route 95, Route 70. So we have our cases of drug trafficking and human trafficking. So even though we're small and affluent, we still have our Section 8 housing. We have our rural farm areas. We have our high rises. It's a pretty neat mix in such a small condensed area. So we endearingly say from the ghettos to the meadows because we have a little bit of everything going on. There is 13 fire stations. We have a couple more coming on the pipeline. There's a career presence in all of them, but we are a combination system. We are nearing 500 career personnel, and we work a 24/48 shift. I'm assigned to the Banneker station, which is Station 7. We have an engine medic and tiller truck, and we staff all our apparatus with 4, 4, and 2. So it kind of gives you just a basic rundown of what we got going on. The Banneker station, the engine, we run probably 3,500 to 4,000 calls depending on the year. Our medics over 4,000. Our ladder truck's about 2,500. So we're not setting records, but we stay busy. So just a little rundown of what Howard County has to offer. So I'm going to get right into this. So the night, July 23rd, we had a big storm come through the area. We had a lightning strike, and according to StrikeNet, which records a lot of this data, at 1:20 in the morning on July 23rd, we had a lightning strike that hit this oak tree up here in the upper right corner. And this specific lightning strike generated 10 times more power than any other lightning strike in the area during the storm that evening. So you can see it's not a great picture, but you can see the hash mark there in the tree. So it hits the tree. The lightning travels underground through the root system. It ends up hitting an above ground propane tank. And then from there, it just goes right down the service lines into the CSST lines throughout the home. This is a picture of the CSST line in the home. And this is a pinhole leak here. And from that lightning strike, we had the pinhole leak, it arced, and we basically had a finger of flame that was burning from that pinhole in the crawl space in this home. So again, that happened at 1:20. A finger of flame, and it's sitting up against dimensional lumber, so 2x6 or 2x8. You hold a match up to a 2x6 or 2x8, it's not really going to do a whole heck of a lot. But when it has time to burn unchecked, obviously things will start to grade and it's going to start moving out. And that's exactly what happened. So the first arriving units arrived at 2 a.m. So no one put a call into the fire department because this thing was deep seated and hidden and it took a while to present itself. One of the tenants in the home they heard clicking on the intercom throughout the home. So I believe it started getting into the electrical wiring for the structure that started to fail, and they heard a lot of clicking through the intercom system. I think it was the kid in the home woke up and started hearing all that clicking, started smelling smoke, got everybody up and put the call into 911, which was around 1:51. So that fire was burning unchecked for a good 40 minutes or more before any calls were even made. So dispatch, because it was just just smoke in the building, we don't dispatch a full box alarm. So we use a local box, or some people call it a street assignment. It's 2 engines, a ladder truck, ambo, and a battalion chief. So they said, respond to Woodscape Drive for visible smoke from the lightning strike. As crews are coming down, the first 2 engine is engine 5-1. They're coming down the street, and when they hit the main intersection about 800 feet away, they can already smell the smoke. All right, 51 gets on location. They get on location at 2 a.m. So now we truly are, with the lightning strike happening, I believe, it was 1:20ish. Yeah, we're looking at a good 40 minutes and out burn time from that lightning strike. So 51 arrives on location. They have smoke showing. He says, give me the full box. So they end up pulling a 200-foot attack line, just a standard cross lay. They go to side alpha. They speak to the homeowner, where he says, okay, everybody's out of the structure. We're good. However, 51 did not make any provisions for water supply. We're using our MDTs, our mobile data terminals. And you can see the battalion chief responding had a different update. So he was able to see that they had a pool in the backyard, and they could use that. Hydrants were further out the street, which I'll kind of discuss here in a minute. So they were going to use the pool in the backyard as their water supply. So the battalion chief had 51 repositioned around the side Charlie. And the homeowner told the battalion that, hey, we have smoke in the basement. Everybody's out of the house, but we do have smoke in the basement. So here's an overview of what we're working with. So as it stands right here, the main structure, the main level and the second story, you're looking at 7,300 square feet of living space at or above grade level. The finished basement, you're looking at 1,100 square feet of finished. And so that's 8,400 total of just finished living space in this structure. Now, using the laser pointer here, this upper side Charlie is what we're calling it, the upper grade. This is where engine 5-1 ended up parking. When you follow around, going around this rotunda here, we have this walkway. This is where a grade change occurs. And this is kind of instrumental for the way the rest of this assignment, this box alarm was handled. It's very confusing. As you can see, we have 2 stories from side alpha. This lower grade of side Charlie is also 2 stories when you account for the basement and the main level. These are where all the bedrooms are, but there's no visible windows. So quite often it's 2 stories from the front, 2 stories from the rear is what it's being called out as. But we have 3 stories of actual grade change. This is the lower part of side Charlie with the grade. This is where the transition occurs, and this is the upper side Charlie. And then again, this is where engine 5-1 parks. Now here's where things get even more confusing, and hopefully I can explain this a little bit better as we go along. Underneath the main level of the home right here, but above the lower part of the finished basement, is an almost 1,000 square foot tall, 4 to 5 foot tall crawl space that is sitting underneath this main level that nobody knew about. It's concrete block wall foundation. Like I said, everything's about 1,000 square feet. It was split in half by a wall, and it just had an open doorway in the middle. And again, I'll get into this a little bit more because that obviously plays big into our operations here. So first in units, this is a general layout of the house. You can see just the general size of what we're working with here. Just a very grand house. 51 and Tower 10, they entered the first floor on that upper side, Charlie, going through the laundry room. They have a charge hose line with them. 3 of the crew members had thermal imaging cameras. Where they're the handhelds, we also have a MSA integrated TIC into the pass device and into that ICM. So they were able, 3 of the crew members were able to see that. I think we have indications of fire below us. So everybody made the decision to back out and try to find a better point of access. The one downside is that the report of fire being underneath of these crews was never articulated out to command or anybody else on the radio. So that was some pretty good information that was missed. But crews continued to battle on and see where they could find this fire. Once they exited the structure, engine 101 Bravo, which is the lineman position, so that's firefighter Flynn, he pulled an additional attack line, a 300-foot line off of engine 51. The battalion 1A was there. He assisted with line deployment, and they ended up going all the way down here to this lower side, Charlie, to get to the basement access and see what they could find. Crews were able to enter. They did find smoke conditions, floor to ceiling smoke conditions. Not a lot of heat though, almost like that cold smoke. So, and you have a pretty massive basement. Like I said, you're looking at 1,100 feet of finished space of a wet bar and a fireplace room, like entertaining room, movie room, a workout room. There's all kinds of stuff going on down here. But they didn't really find a whole lot of heat. So they started backing out, and the officer at Tower 10 controls the door. So he does a good job with that. So moving on, as these things are starting to progress, here's some of the red flag status reports that are coming out. And keep in mind, the remainder of the box alarm that's responding is still missing out on a lot of these radio transmissions because they're working on the upgrade, they're working on dispatch, turnout time coming down the road. So a lot of these things are being missed by other companies. So the officer 51 said he talked to the homeowner, and most of the heavy smoke is in the basement. The battalion aide, he says, very educated guy, good dude from Station 7. He was the fill-in battalion aide for a long-term detail assignment. He comes around doing the 360, and he said very clearly, we do have smoke in the basement. We do have access. It is a finished basement. It's just to kind of give us an indication of what kind of fire load we may encounter, but he does have smoke conditions. The driver of Tower 10, from Side Alpha, he's like, hey, I got just to the left of the front door, I have moderate smoke coming from the ground level. To me, that's a good indicator that something's coming from the basement as well. When you have that nondescript smoke coming from like the mortar space in between those two floors, that doesn't have an obvious exhaust path, that's a great indicator of a basement fire. So that was some good information. 51 came back, the officer, and said, hey, have somebody PPV the front door. We do have smoke in the basement. You can't find the fire. Not a tactic we typically use, but I think maybe in just the confusion of what was going on, they were trying to search for some other tactics that may have helped them find this thing. And then the Tower 10 officer, once they did make it to the basement, when they repositioned on that lower side of Side Charlie, they said, we do have smoke conditions from floor to ceiling. They did close the door back up, and then all the crews you have are going to enter back on Side Charlie. So once they couldn't find any obvious fire in the basement, they pulled back and we're going to go back around top. So, but the Tower 10 officer did a great job. He accounted for the units, accounted for their location. He wanted to recontrol the door so he could control that flow path. And but while that was happening, all the crews started booking back up to the top of the upper grade of Side Charlie. So as all this is happening, engine 101, the officer, she's coming around that Bravo Charlie side. We're at the upper grade. 51 is probably right on the other side of the fence, just outside of the view. But she reports that she sees heavy fire from this door. So she said we need to redeploy our line back up to the initial entrance. So firefighter Flynn came back up to that upper side entrance. He poured another 200-foot attack line off of engine 51, and the crews just redeployed through that laundry room door. And again, the battalion chief, after speaking with the homeowner, gave another all clear, but they're going back into the structure. So as this is going on, I'm going to quickly hit the pause button and kind of talk to you about what's happening on the upgrade now. So at around 2:09, the upgrade gets alerted. So it's a Sunday night. I'm in bed at 2 a.m. I know a storm's coming through and we're getting hit up for a box alarm on the upgrade. I'm thinking, yeah, they probably, some crews probably got somewhere. They did have smoke. Typical lightning strike. Maybe you got something in the attic. Maybe you got some burn up receptacles somewhere, electrical sockets, but this is probably going to be something low budget. But at 7, we treat everything like it's real. So we were ready to go. We were completely geared up. We're coming down the road. And I want to be very clear. I grew up right down the street from this. So I knew that I wanted to come in from a different direction. I was familiar with the area, but I want to be very clear in that I did not grow up in a house like this. I grew up in a 1970s rancher that a Mennonite farmer built, half a mile down the street. This is kind of an atypical street for the area. But I say that because I did know the area very well, and I kind of changed our route of travel so we could hit this hydrant and get a better option for water. Once we got on scene, selfishly, I wanted to split lay from Guilford and Woodscape to get to the scene a little closer. Hopefully get a little bit more playtime if it came to that. But there was a lot of confusion between myself, between command officer about what 101 and 51 had or had not done for laying out lines. So we all assumed that there was hose in the street, and however there wasn't. So we were originally positioned up here at Berrywood Court and had to wait on orders about what exactly needed to occur to establish that water supply. Long story short, we ended up dumping the entire hose bed as we came in. We ended up 300 feet short prior to making our final position here. And the drivers off of 71 and 101 did a fantastic job really quickly getting 300 feet of hose off and finishing that lay, never losing water, never having an issue. So we arrived finally on scene at around 2:12. We were originally assigned to go on side alpha and make entry through side alpha to see what we could find. As soon as we were about to make entry, the battalion chief was like, you know what? Something's not right. You guys hold up. I want you to go on deck. At the time, we were using the blue card command system. So on deck means, hey, you're in a forward position. You're ready to be deployed. You have all the things you need, but you're not formally being inside on the interior. So we go on deck. So I figured I would make good use of my time. I opened the front door, which had already been forced but controlled. Opened the front door, and I used my thermal imaging camera to see what's going on. There are some pretty good smoke conditions, but nothing obvious on the tick. No major heat signatures. There's no pressurized wave currents. I'm not seeing anything coming from the floor. So I turn everything off. I close the door again, and I wait for my orders. As I look up, I notice that there's just lazy brown smoke kind of coming from the eaves. So to me, I'm thinking, okay, we got brown smoke, so it's burning structural components. And because it's not under a whole lot of velocity, this thing's probably, is being volume pushed just to fill up 8,400 square feet and finally get to the eaves. This thing's deep seated, and we're having a hard time finding it. So there was just this eerie quietness that started to come, but the command officer knew that, hey, I don't need to send these guys in right now. So truck 7 and 71 together, we just staged on side alpha. All right, so here's where things kick off.
Unit calling to Mayday. Unit calling to Mayday. Go ahead.
All right, so this is what we get. We're sitting at the front door, and 1 minute and 45 seconds after arriving on side alpha, engine and truck 7 hear this radio transmission. So Mayday, Mayday, Mayday. Flynn is in the basement to the left. I know it's hard to understand, but when you look at the radio transmission, it says 101 is in the basement. I have a hose line trying to pull him up, go through the basement. Our 2nd Battalion Chief had already taken side Charlie command, or maybe it happened just soon thereafter. Firefighter Flynn fell through the floor. He's down the hose line and could not get pulled back up. He is 1 floor below grade level. So seemingly that would be the basement. Now, when this happened, this happened at 2:20 a.m. So now you're talking pretty much exactly an hour from when that lightning strike first occurred. And now we have an hour of burn time without any water on the fire. Firefighter Flynn did a fantastic job of giving his Mayday out. It was consistent with our Mayday training. He gave out a good who, what, where. And the one downside is that was on Bravo 2. Engine 101 gave her transmission on Bravo 1 at the exact same time, and Bravo 1 will trump out Bravo 2. Nobody on the fire ground heard it. Nobody in the communication center heard it. And the reason he was probably on Bravo 2 is because we were going through some radio changes. We just had a new radio template programmed on some new Motorola Apex radios. When they, one of the features was it was a last channel power up. So whatever channel you were on when you closed off your radio, when you turned it off, is the radio that you're going to be on when you brought back up. You could change every single button, toggle through the channel selectors. You could be on Alpha 16, but whatever channel you were on last, when you powered it up, that's the one you were on. And I know I'm guilty of it. There's a lot of just habits that needed to be changed that night. And I know for me, there's plenty of times when I'm on Alpha 2 when we're running medicals and car wrecks as our ops, just general ops channel. And then you hear a box come out, you switch over to the Bravo TAC channel, and you're still on Bravo 2 because you didn't switch back. So we have had some radio changes that have come from this Mayday. We've learned from that. So that last channel power up feature is gone. We have a new man down feature that goes into alarm and mirrors what our pass devices do on our SCBA. So we have had some good fixes that come out of that. But it's unfortunate that the Mayday message was missed. So according to the investigation, firefighter Flynn fell through a hole that was already in the floor. The floor did not give way. We have some of the amazing investigative teams, and they brought in state and federal investigators as well to assist. And the hole was already in the floor, and Flynn went down and immediately gave his Mayday. So this is a basic overview of what happened. So again, we were told to go on deck on side Alpha. Truck 7 had already been assigned RIT, but we only had 1 minute and 45 seconds after physically arriving on location to being assigned the RIT on deck position, or RIT or on deck. Flynn gave out his Mayday on Bravo 2. Some of the things I want you to take note of, and I'm going to dig deeper as we go through this program. It took 22 minutes from the time the Mayday was sounded to the time he was out of the structure. It took 22 minutes, 11 seconds. From the time we actually made entry, the RIT team actually made entry onside Charlie and came back out with him was 15 minutes and 5 seconds, and I'm going to get into that. At one point, 51 runs out of water. They had a pump error. There was a lot of things going on through this, and a lot of this data is gleaned from technical data from literally everything from Apple Watches to SCBA data to transmissions from the radio. They have some pretty accurate data to support a lot of these timestamps. So, and keep in mind that this is all being done in an 8,400 square foot home, not including that crawl space. So we're gonna continue to dive into this. So here's side Charlie. We had an aerial view here a minute ago. Using the laser pointer here, this is the probable location of where engine and truck 7 entered through. Now, when the Mayday was sounded, truck 7 went around side Bravo, engine 7 went around side Delta. Together, we'd made a quick plan like, hey, listen, you go this way, you go the other way. Together, we're going to build this 360 together so we're not wasting time. So we each went our own direction. We put the 360 together. We had a discussion on the backside. And by the time I got around and met up with the Captain Love on truck 7 on the backside, the engine 7-1 crew had a charged 300-foot attack line, redeployed, ready to go on side Charlie. They made very quick work of it. When we got to the backside, you'll see this rotunda. It's kind of hard to see in this picture, but just underneath it, there was some void space. And from the exterior, there was like just a dirt opening that showed just a little bit of that plenum space in between the basement and the main level. And we could see fire showing from that exterior crawl space. So we knew we had a pretty good fire. We knew it started to expose itself. We knew it was in the structure. And now we're really just waiting to redeploy. So here's what we're working with in the basement. We can see where engine 51 came in. Again, this is the crawl space underneath the main level, but above the main portion of the basement level. After we had redeployed and met on side Charlie, we still had members unaccounted for, a couple members off of 101, off of engine 51. And it took us 3 minutes to do the 360 to redeploy lines, just gather what exactly we were doing. And by the time we made it to the backside, we were told to wait because we didn't have a good PAR report on other units. So it took another 4 minutes to identify 2 other missing firefighters, a missing officer, and we were being held up from going in because we didn't know exactly where these people were. We didn't know how many we had to look for until it finally came out. We have accounted for these people. It is just firefighter Flynn. So once we made it in to access this entire space, it's a half set of steps, and there is one way in and there's one way out. So once we were actually given the green light after waiting on the backside, knocking down a little bit of fire from the exterior from what we could, we were then given the green light. So once we went into the structure and we were given the green light, every single member, without saying a word, just clipped into their regulators. You didn't hear a single word. And I remember the Truck 7 firefighter, Carlos Brown, said it was really amazing to hear because everybody clipped in. There wasn't a word that was uttered because everybody knew their job. Everybody knew the expectation. And we had worked so well together for so long that there was no confusion of what needed to be done. So we enter the structure. Myself and the captain were first in. And I remember thinking, hey, things are rapidly evolving. We know we have a deep-seated working fire somewhere. We have zero visibility conditions, and we're in a really large structure. I need to take a step back for a second. So I let everybody come up. Using my thermal imaging camera, I'm trying to get a decent idea of mapping the room. I'm kind of taking that quote-unquote tactical pause to see exactly where all of my men are going and what exactly they're doing. Let me back up for a second. I want you to take note of this set of steps right here. This set of steps, as soon as we entered Side Charlie and we started doing a right-hand search, this first set of steps went back up to that main level. As Truck 7 got to those steps, two of the members split up. They went to the top of the steps. They swept their hand across it, and they said, it is way too hot up here. Carlos Brown said, hey, it feels like my arm is going to melt off. Like, we can't go this way, and this is just, we can't do it. So we came back down, we continued our right-hand search. This picture on the left is kind of taken from Side Charlie looking back towards Alpha. Doesn't give you a great representation of the scale of the building, but we're going through a fireplace sitting room. We're going through, you can see a wet bar area. Over to the other side, there's things like bathrooms and workout areas and movie rooms. But we're just making our way up through the structure. We're trying to continue to map to make sure that we don't get turned around. And we're just scanning the areas with the tick, constantly keeping track. I'm trying to track the movement of my crew, and we're all just kind of going up in the stack together with this 300-foot hose line. So as we're going through, somebody yelled back, hey, we got a set of steps up here. And for some reason, all of us, it gave us that feeling like this is going to lead us to where we need to be. So we have gone, our line is now gone from Side Alpha, around Side Delta, through Charlie, all the way back to Side Alpha. And now we're back to the Alpha wall. So we're looking at this right side picture. This wall right here is the foundation block for the Alpha side. We're in a storage room, and this is the half set of steps that led us into this crawl space. You can see just the amount of storage that we're dealing with, a ton of wiring. So crews got the hose line in place. We're about to hit the top of the steps. And the truck crew stayed back so we can get the line in. So they stacked on the steps. Myself, the captain, and the engine company continued on with the hose line. And we made first entry into the crawl space. About 10 feet in, we could hear Flint's pass device going off somewhere in front of us. And I said, the captain's over to my shoulder. I said, Cap, I can hear it. He's somewhere right in front of me. So we had probably entered about another 10 to 15 feet into the crawl space, and we just have storage all around us. There is catering equipment for about 60 people, tables and chairs, Costco-sized catering equipment and kitchen supplies. There's decorations for all types of holidays. There's oil tanks and stuff in the basement for other miscellaneous storage. There's just tight little narrow pathways to get in and out. So moving on, quick pause. This video was taken a couple minutes after we made entry. And all the thing I'm trying to illustrate here are the smoke conditions, because remember, this thing has now been free burning for over an hour and no water's been applied to this deep-seated fire. So the maydays occurred, the RIT team, engine and truck 7 all together. We're now going into this structure. We're probably just prior to making those steps. And this is the smoke conditions from the upper grade of Side Charlie from where they entered with the hose line.
Get away. Start it out.
Okay, we can see here that's pretty gnarly, right? We're starting to build velocity, so we know it's getting heat pushed. It's starting to get turbulent, and we still haven't made the steps yet. So this thing is just still free burning. It's got a good exhaust point from, most likely, I'm assuming, from the hole that's been created in the ground or in that main level from where Nate probably fell through. And from the outside, I mean, let it thing go a little bit longer, and that thing's going to be free burning. We're probably going to have signs of flashover to me. So those are pretty gnarly conditions that we're entering when we're hitting that crawl space. So I'm now going to move forward. So we've hit the top of the steps, and I'm going to let firefighter Alessandrini, he's the one riding the line that night. He's engine 71 Bravo. One of my right-hand guys. He's a Air Force veteran, just an all-around good dude. He's super proud of this mustache. Don't get lost in the stash. He's got a really great message. I'm going to let him talk about what we experience next in his words, and then I'm going to build upon that. So let's see what Drini has to say.
Took the line up the steps, and this is where we were actually met with the most heat and the most fire. I kept the nozzle open pretty much the whole time. I'd fire to the left of me, in front of me, and to the right. Kind of just making my way up the steps. And I remember it was Lieutenant Burchick tapped me on my shoulder and said, "Hey, we got fire over the back of your right shoulder here." And this is where I went to move the nozzle to the right, and I couldn't. I didn't know what was kind of going on at the time. I just know I couldn't move the nozzle, from in front of me to the right of me. I kind of reached up to feel, and I felt wires along the nozzle. And as I moved forward to free the nozzle, I realized that I couldn't move myself. I was entangled. I remember just, Lieutenant Burchick was still there, and I said, "Hey, I'm tangled. I cannot move." And, calm, cool, collected, he got out his cutters, and he freed me. And around this time, Captain Love, the truck captain, also became entangled in wires, and he was also freed. Just an eerie feeling. We do a lot of we do a lot of training. Until you're in that situation, it's a scary feeling. I was just very blessed to have the crew that we had that night. The youngest guy on our crew that night was, 10 years on the job. We were all very trained and aware of aware of each other and what we're capable of, and it's just the eerie feeling. And like I said, I was just so lucky to be with the crew that I had that night. As we advanced up these stairs, firefighter Andy Hoffman, who was riding in the C position on engine 7-1 that night, so we got him. He had found Lieutenant Flynn, and then the crews from engine 7, truck 7, went up, got him, pulled him out, and that's when Captain Love from truck 7 made the radio communication that we got him, we're bringing him out. I remember them, bringing Lieutenant Flynn out next to me, and I was still on the nozzle. I didn't want to leave that position just because of the high heat, the flames, the visibility, and they got him out.
All right, Drini does a fantastic job, providing the setup for what we're going through. He's being incredibly humble. He saved our lives that night, and every crew member from engine and truck 7 saved each other's lives that night from whatever actions they had. And we're going to break that down really quick. So continuing on, you can see what smoke conditions are when we're getting into that crawl space. And granted, this picture on the right is a picture of the crawl space after everything had been collapsed and kind of cleared out. But this is the main area. You can see where a lot of the tables and chairs were from catering equipment. This is the wall that separated the two sections of the crawl space. And the doorway was right about here, where we found him, fortunately, right in the doorway. So as we get to the top of the steps, we're going towards this pass device. We have high heat, low visibility. It's driving us to our knees. And I feel wires pull across my chest. And I remember thinking, I can lift these wires up and duck under and get to Nate, but then I'm going to have to be dragging him back through this mess. And that's not going to happen. So I start taking the cutters out and I started just cutting away what was in front of me and in front of my chest. And it was kind of a blessing and a curse. The fire starts kicking up and it gave me a little bit more light to see the wiring and what was going on. But obviously it's a bad situation to be in when you have all these deep-seated pockets of fire from all the storage in there. And my tick it's just going haywire because there's just kind of stuff everywhere. Some of it's hidden, some of it hasn't caught on fire yet. There's just a lot of stuff down there. And I look over at Drini and I said, "Hey man, it's getting pretty bad in here. You got to get this knocked down so we can move up." And he was hunched over. And I want you to be, granted, Drini is one of my best friends and a super calm dude. And in one of the worst moments you could ever feel, I want you to call your officer bro. He said, "Bro, I'm stuck and the nozzle's stuck. I can't do anything until I get out of here." So the wires had wrapped so tightly around the bail, he couldn't even open the nozzle. So quickly we start clipping away. So he's freed. He's able to start knocking down fire. As soon as he opens the nozzle up, it knocked the helmet off the truck captain, unfortunately, and he's trying to get out of the way so he can still communicate. He's trying to communicate out, and he can't because we're in this basically underground block room. So he's getting no signal to be able to transmit out. So I see wires starting to encircle his torso. So start clipping away and start getting all that unstuck. Firefighter Munyuan, he slid up and he starts helping to clear the rest of the stuff out. He's like, "Bro, I got you." And he starts clearing the rest of the exit paths so we actually have places to go to get in and get out. I remember turning back and looking at him and saying, "Listen, make sure that the remainder of the crew is stacked on the side of the steps. If this gets bad and this thing flashes on us, we need room to bail. I don't want, 4 of us to bail and hit a stack of bodies. So just try to get off the side, single stack on the steps, so we have room to bail in case we need to." And when all this was occurring, Trini's knocking down fire. The captain's trying to keep the tabs on everybody and try to get communication out. Our backup guy on the engine, Andy Hoffman, that dude was like a caged tiger. He slid up and he got to Nate first. As soon as he got to Nate, he did a quick check. He made sure that his mask was on. He made sure that he had air, which Nate did. Nate did exactly what he was trained to do in the worst moment of his life. He did incredibly well. He kept his mask on. He kept his BE on super tight. He had air in his tank. Andy Hoffman already had his transfull line out. He was ready to give him air if he needed to. He did a quick check to make sure the straps were tight and his mask was on, which they were. And he started to position him in a place to where we could get him out. As I'm sliding up, I baseball swing my Halligan bar to make sure that the floor underneath of us was good as hard as I could. I slid up to meet with him, and I'm thinking, there's no way I can drag him out with all this stuff. So I drop my tools, and we both just try to pull, and we don't go anywhere. So I look at Andy and say, "Hey, we're going to time this. 1, 2, 3, pull." And we're on all fours. Nate's now on his back, and I have the left shoulder strap. Andy's got the right, and we do 1, 2, 3, pull. And on all fours, we pull, and he starts moving. 1, 2, 3, pull. 1, 2, 3, pull, and we're making progress. But we still have this little narrow pathway around all the storage to get through. So we're still tripping and falling over all the storage equipment in there. So we have about a good 25 to 30 feet of travel from where we found him over here back to the entrance of the crawl space. I remember thinking metabolically, I'm working as hard as I ever have. And I'm going to touch on that here in a minute. I'm working at probably 95% of my max perceived effort and just doing this 1, 2, 3 pull, going through the adrenaline, going through the heat and fire, going through the entanglement. And we get him back to the top of the steps. The captain's trying to communicate. Drini's doing a great job keeping the fire in check. And keep in mind, when Drini started flowing water after he was entangled, that is the first water that had been applied on that fire at any point in time during the incident. So now we're well over an hour of free burn time. And 71 had the first water on the fire just to keep things in check. So it just gives you another indication of how well things had progressed to this point and how deep-seated this thing was. We get Nate to the top of the steps, and the truck crew, Munyun and Carlos Brown, are just ready and waiting. And they get him down the steps and out through the storage space and out through the main part of the basement.
Go ahead, Rick.
We got firefighter flame, the EMS to the Charlie side basement doors.
All right, Rick, you have firefighter Flynn, and you're on the Charlie side basement door. EMS 1, are you direct? Division Charlie, are you direct?
Okay, so this is just a general layout. Again, this is not the scale. The sides are even labeled incorrectly, but it kind of gives you a good idea of where we're going through. This is the entire crawl space. This is the wall splitting the pieces of the crawl space, and this is where we found them in between the doors. Our obvious exit path doesn't give a really good indication of how tightly packed all this stuff really was. But we got to the top of the steps, we got them out, and as soon as we all hit the steps, that's when our low air alarm started going off. So I remember looking down, I had 1,300 PSI left about, and I remember not panicking, but started getting worried, like I'm working my ass off right now, and my low air alarm hit, and we still got to make it out. And that's, if nothing else bad happens to us. We continue out. The truck dude does a great job getting them down the steps and out through the storage rooms, this butler's pantry, and out into the main area of the basement. And we're all smoked. I mean, we've been on air for a while. We've been working hard. Our adrenaline is high. And I reached down to pick up Nate again to get him out the rest of the way of the basement. And he doesn't budge. He does not move. And I remember looking up, and the secondary RIT team had moved a lot of the tables and chairs out of the way. They had set up floodlights, so we had a beacon of light to go straight towards, which was fantastic. And one of the members from Engine 6-1 said, "Dude, I got him," grabbed him and took him out. And as soon as he got him out, they brought him out to his awaiting crew. They brought him to Paramedic 105, which was his own crew. His own guys went and took charge, got him onto the stretcher, immediately started getting his PPE off and starting CPR and resuscitation efforts. And my hat's off to them for just, emotionally having to deal with one of the hardest things, working on your own guys. And they just did a great job. So we get out, and between witness statements and a lot of the studies that they're showing, within 1 to 2 minutes after engine and truck 7 exited the structure, the rest of the crawl space in that we were in collapsed. So we were living on borrowed time. We're thinking 1 to 2 minutes, and had we spent any more time in that joint, this could have been much worse for ourselves and for other RIT teams and for the rest of the incident scene. So we got out of the structure. We dressed down. There's still fire showing at that plenum space from that rotunda that we saw earlier. And we were shot, and we were basically out of service from that point. So now I'm going to flip gears a little bit. I'm going to talk about some driving into the Mayday side of it a little bit more. So Project Mayday is a fantastic resource. They have split it between career and volunteer, but they do have, from the career side, when I last checked, it was well over almost 5,000 audio reports to confirm data. And they've built up this just database for Maydays and near misses. So what we're looking at here is, I don't want to say that we were destined to have a Mayday, but if you were an officer driving down the road, if you're a command officer in charge of a scene, and you see where all these pieces of data are starting to stack up, there's some correlation here. Doesn't mean causation, but there's some things that we can glean from this. So Project Mayday has found that the number of personnel that suffers or experiences a Mayday event is that 200 to 500 personnel size, and we're at 500. The number one time that it occurs is between 1 and 3 a.m. Ours was at 1:52. The Mayday happened at 2:20. Maydays occur, generally speaking, 25 to 30 minutes into an incident. Ours was 28 minutes. 83% of the time, the first or second engine is affected and is the Mayday. Ours was from the second and first engines. 41% of the time, it's a 3-person crew. And at the time, we still had 3 engines in the county that were operating with 3 personnel, and engine 101 was that. So this is just, if you have the time, get on Project Mayday. It has fantastic information. And it just, like I said, it doesn't mean causation, but it gives you a good idea of how this deck might be stacked against you. So what they've also found, from the time that a RIT crew is actually ready, you're almost nearing 3 minutes. We had 1 minute and 45 seconds from the time we arrived on location to the time that Mayday was sounded. From the time, RIT entry, 3 minutes is national average. Now for us, it was 7 minutes. Keep in mind that those first 3 minutes, so right there with what Project Mayday has found, is that we were doing our 360s, we're redeploying lines, we're getting our groups together, we're getting a plan together, we're getting ready to go in. The other 4 minutes, we were physically being held up because we had reports of other missing firefighters. We did not know their location. So 4 minutes of that 7 minutes was taken up with that. By the time we actually contacted the down firefighter, we're looking at less than 12 and a half. They're at almost 6. My conscience is clear that we've doubled that time because we're in an over 8,400 square foot structure with an unknown 1,000 square foot crawl space. Total time inside is 15 minutes. National average, what we're looking at is 12 and a half. Total time is 22 minutes, and we're just a minute past what Project Mayday has found. 12 firefighters to rescue 1. We had 7 on our crew that night, and 1 in 5 RIT teams experienced their own Mayday while trying to overcome the initial Mayday. And obviously 3 of us experienced our own entanglement. So the Project Mayday's got some great data. 20% of them are being lost, 20% of Maydays are falling into a basement. Of those falls, 43% are from a collapse and 32% are falling into a hole, which is what happened to firefighter Flynn. 62% of entanglement issues are from wires and ductwork, and 68% of personnel have the type of cutter on them to affect self-rescue. So that means 1/3 of firefighters out there don't have the right tool. And if they do have the tool, is it actually the right one to cut wire? And so these are just things that you need to keep in the back of your mind. RIT uses 21% more air than a typical on-scene company. So if you have the time, definitely check out Project Mayday. And this is just to kind of paint the picture from what national averages are finding, probably in more typical residential structures, and what Engine and Truck 7 accomplished in a mansion. So I'm going to hit the pause button really quick. These are, I could spend an entire 2 hours just talking about dealing with the effects of a line of duty death. I'm just going to briefly tell a quick story about mine. I could go for hours, and this is just my story, and all my guys have their own stories. This is simply just mine. The picture on the right here, I like to endearingly call them my 2 feral children. At the time, they were 2 and 4. They are absolute firecrackers, but they're just sweet natured girls. It's summertime, so they're not in school, and our house is a disaster because they're running rampant, and they're in princess dresses, and they're dancing. My wife had prompted them about what had happened, and I came home, and I look at my youngest daughter, who's 2, and I'd obviously been upset, and she goes, "Daddy, are you okay?" And I tried to laugh it off, and I said, "Yeah, I'll be okay." And she looked at me really puzzled because it didn't make sense if I was okay and why I was crying. And then she kind of cocked her head and was like, "Daddy?" I said, "Yeah, babe. Can I have cereal?" And I kind of laughed because, it's the innocence of a 2-year-old, and I still had to be dad. So I help her out, and I look at my older daughter, Harper, who's 5, and she goes, "Dad, is your friend hurt?" And I said, "Yeah, he's hurt. He's not going to make it home." And you could see that, 5-year-old mind is processing it. And I guess whatever I said, it satisfied her. And she goes, "Dad," and I said, "Yeah, babe, She goes, you're standing in front of the TV. So again, I still got to be dad. The innocence kind of helped out a little bit. You know, they still don't really truly understand the gravity of what's going on. And the picture of the left is exactly 1 week later, and it's my oldest daughter's birthday. We have both sides of the family. They get along great. They're both hanging out. We're having a good time. We're grilling. Everybody's in the kitchen, laughing and cutting up, and everything slowed down like I was in a movie. And I remember looking left and looking right and seeing everybody just engaged in conversation and having a great time. And I broke down in the middle of the kitchen because, one, I was thankful that I had that family unit and that I was home safe with my family. And then this immense guilt came over me because Celeste is at home without a dad, without a husband. Their 5 children are without the dad. And I went upstairs. I got a good crying. I washed my face. I came back down, and nobody was the wiser for the next year until I told my wife a year later. Like I said, I could go on for hours talking about what we encountered getting to the hospital, what we encountered at the hospital, weeks and months later, coming back into work the next shift. When we cleared the scene, went to the hospital, and then went back to the firehouse, Howard County's recruit class 31 started their first day on the job. And I met wide-eyed recruits that didn't know what to do, and I didn't know what to tell them. Had it been 24 hours earlier, it would have been their first day. 5 hours earlier, they would have been on that call. You know, who knows how that could have changed things. So it's just, like I said, I can go on for hours. This is just a little bit of my story and just try to bring things into perspective. So I know we're rocking. I want to just keep going into this last little part here. This is the back third of this presentation, and we're going to wrap this up. So this is not the outcome that any of us wants. We want to bring Nate back if we could. And unfortunately, that's the reality of where we're at. But Engine and Truck 7 accomplished some amazing things that night. There could potentially have been more dead firefighters on scene, injured, put off the job. It could have gotten worse. But in many ways, in a raw way, we were successful. So I'm going to kind of dig down into that a little bit. So Engine and Truck 7. Everybody you see here was on that call. This is a screenshot from staffing that night. Everybody here except for Sam Brogy. He just got off recruit status. He's a rock star. He's working in DC now. I dearly miss him. He spent his time in the fire service, his young time, becoming just a professional and working hard towards becoming just a squared away firefighter. And he was instrumental that night in helping us get the line deployed and making sure we had every inch of that line that we needed. When we were deep in that crawl space, we had, I think they're estimated about 10 to 15 feet left of that 300-foot line before we would have run out. So thankfully we weren't in there any deeper. Everybody else on the crew that night had well over 10 years. There's probably upwards of 170 years worth of experience from these crews that night. And we don't just work together. Like we're friends. We spend time outside the firehouse together. Our wives know each other and they spend time together. Our kids know each other. When you see a common thread in an IOSH report is crew continuity. Nobody was detailed in or out. Everybody there was assigned to 7, and we knew our capabilities. We knew the expectations of each other. And that to me stuck out as just being a super important part. And I know that not everybody can benefit from this. Maybe you're in a volunteer house where you don't know who the crews are going to be. That's okay. That just drives home the expectation of you need to have clear expectations, and you need to know what your goals are, and you need to have some basic fundamental training constantly ingrained in your skill set. So that way, when you don't have the continuity like we had that night, you can still overcome these types of situations. Now, the video isn't working here, but what you can see are lights going off. I'm going to get into the training side of things. What you're seeing here is Engine 7's engine bay. Everything's blacked out. We have contractor bags over the windows. We have plywood on either side of the wall, on either side of a forcible entry prop, to simulate a narrow hallway. And right before I took this video, The guys are in gear, on air, doing push-ups, and then they have to do 2-person inward and outward swinging, and then single person inward and outward swinging. And that is the final culmination of weeks of training for forcible entry that we do probably once a year, once every 18 months. And if you could hear the sound, all you hear is really clear, concise communication between orders, between the iron guy talking to his backup guy. If you start with this, you're going to fail. And I think too often people get really caught up on doing the really cool, sexy things, and they forget about the fundamentals. And so I'm going to keep driving that point home. Here's a video from a good friend of mine who volunteers up in PA. Just a quick cliff notes. This is a 1-minute video, but it sheds the light about what training can do to either increase or hamper in performance. They have a rockin' 2-story split level home. Quick side notes are that the engine, the computer module took a dump on them, so they couldn't get in a pump gear. I had to wait for another company, so things were eaten. And this is what you see, and I'll kind of explain more on the back end. Sorry, here we go. All right, this is a fantastic video. So they're in the upper level of the split, and one of the firefighters in the hallway drops down from a small collapse and is up to his waist now and just burning material. And so you can hear the screams that are coming. And you see the firefighter in the video goes, "Mayday, mayday, mayday." And then he comes back a couple seconds later and goes, "Mayday, mayday, mayday." They get him out, they drag him out. He ends up having to do a little bit of burning of care, but he ends up being okay. And so they look at this video on the back end of this and like, "Hey, listen, you got the mayday out. This is great. You never keyed up your radio though." And basically what ends up happening, and I'm totally guilty of this, is we sit around coffee tables and we talk out the mayday, we talk out the situation, but we've never been trained to actually make the physical contact of bringing your hand up to the mic, listening for the chirp of the mic, and keying up the radio and going, "Mayday, mayday, mayday." So I don't fault this guy at all. He does exactly what he's trained to do. And I know I've been guilty of the same things. I was running training evolutions for some of my companies and realizing that I'm starting to build in a repetition scheme that isn't consistent with what they're going to find on the fire ground. And I can see it now starting to seep into their training and what they're doing on calls. And so this totally changed my mindset of how we have to make it as realistic as possible. So how do we do that? It's just progressive training. We have to do the crawl, walk, run. So many people sit there, and when I go to certain companies and I say, "Hey, let's get into some training," they look at me with fear in their eyes because they think that I'm going to put them on the spot. I'm going to chastise them. I'm going to say, "Hey, I know more than you," or maybe they're going to do a skill that they've never experienced. And we need to overcome that. So we need to say, why are we doing it this way? And we need to start with the basics. We need to make sure that everybody's on the same page and understands the same expectations. And when you can increase complexity, that only comes when you start with the basic fundamentals and until you cannot get them wrong, right? I know I'm preaching to the choir here. This is nothing new, but this is so important because you're going to revert back. All the training and research shows that. And over time, that slow is smooth and smooth is fast. Your new normal, your new fast is actually quite fast. Your slow is fast. So we need to build up these sets and reps so that way on the back end, yeah, we just become a force to be reckoned with. When you first start at any type of sport, you can think of, we'll just say MMA. You know, if you've never thrown a punch before, you probably look like a wounded baby giraffe trying to throw punches up there. And then you got somebody like Mike Tyson who's just doing warm-ups and he's in this like flow state. His new normal has progressed over years, and we're doing that, and we can do that with sets and reps. So we just need to start with fundamentals. We need to constantly hone them. Then we can increase complexity. We need to start with a crawl, walk, run. I think all too often people are like, oh, cool, hey, let's do this basic training, and then airplanes are falling into structures and bombs are going off. And that's not realistic, and people always want to have the upper hand, but we need to make our crew successful. And it's okay to experience failure. We just need to wrap it up with some type of level of success. And so I throw this in here because I've seen it time and time again. You want to know how to build morale? You've got to do hard things. Struggle is good and struggle is okay. I've seen people just do simple search drills and freak out because they haven't put on a mask in a long time. When somebody's low air alarm goes off, you can see the stress increase. You can see the shaking hands. You can see the fine motor skills start to go out the window and they start to revert back to gross motor skills. I take people through entanglement props and they're in a clear environment. It's clear as day. They can see everything and they start thrashing because they're scared of what they're actually starting to see and experience. And so we just have to calm that individual down and get them through and talk to them and say, hey, what do you see? What do you feel? How can you overcome this? What has your training taught you? And when they successfully complete something, it's like they just won the Super Bowl. Like I've seen people like high-fiving and pumping their arms in the air, and you can do some really amazing things. So it's okay to experience failure. You have to build up to that point. And once you do, you're going to do some really awesome stuff. So this is where stress inoculation comes in. Once you start getting to more of that back end, you need to be able to stress yourself. A lot of special operators out there in the military have shown that you need to experience things in training, because if the first time you experience them is on a real incident, you are so much more likely to fail. So through research, they found that once you hit about 145 beats per minute, there's a significant breakdown in the performance of whatever skill you're trying to perform. And there is a difference between physical stress and adrenaline-induced stress. You can go out there and, pound the pavement and get in the weight room. And we're going to talk about that in a second, but that's not the same type of stress as that emotional stress. So a lot of people call once you hit 145, you start going to condition gray. And condition gray is when you start losing out on those fine motor skills. However, if you are a highly trained individual and you've worked those motor patterns and you've worked those sets and reps, you can actually start to revert to autopilot. And when you're physically and emotionally stressed, you can actually use that adrenaline for good, where for a lot of people, that's what's going to inhibit them. And they found in public safety that military members and police officers, they've actually defecated themselves. They actually lose control of their bowels once they get to that point, because they've never experienced that in training. It's the first time they do it. And their body basically goes into shutdown and protection mode. So we need to stay away from that. It's happened to firefighters. So this is what's going on. We need to have a simple set of skills, and they need to be more of the complex gross motor skill side, not the fine motor skills. And we need to constantly fine tune them. So once you get above 175 beats per minute, generally speaking, that's when you start to freeze. That's when you go into fight or flight and you start having tunnel vision. You start tuning out things. Like I said, people have literally defecated themselves. But some of the highest performers who have had extensive training perform super well in that condition gray and red area. And that's the point that we need to hit. That's the point we need to train up to. A couple of, there's one guy, don't even try to spell it. His Dr. Csikszentmihalyi. He's a Croatian dude. He's the one who actually founded the theory of the flow state. I know we talk about it. When we talk about musicians, all that dude's like, he's flowing. Think about the musician though, when he is in that flow state, when they're going through like a 10-minute jam session or they're hitting their solos, it's like flawless and it's natural. Firefighters and police and military, we can hit that same flow state. And I feel like that's kind of how we were operating the night at Woodscape. So flow state, like you need to be challenged, but you need to build up your skill set. You go to autopilot and you actually purposefully down-regulate your cognition side. Like you don't overly think things. Things are just natural to you. And you just have this overall feeling of control. So that night when we experienced the entanglement in high heat, low visibility conditions, when our heart rates were through the roof, it felt natural. I'd been there before. And in fact, my training was harder physically than it was in real life, but it's because I was able to go through those sets and reps that I experienced that. And same with all the guys around me. They experienced that stress and they were able to come a whole lot. So how can we make ourselves successful? Me personally, I was fortunate that I became a trainer for the IFF Fireground Survival Program. And they do a great job with just starting with small things like preventing the mayday, like reading smoke. When I was on Site Alpha and I saw the brown unpressurized smoke, I knew things were not going well. And all the crews around me you read the smoke and you can see it. So they talk about being mayday ready. They talk about techniques, but then they start bringing in everybody like command and like communications, and you involve all the parties. If it's just your firefighters, you might, that's obviously good. And that's the most important piece. But when you start to wrap in everybody, so that dispatchers know what to do and command knows the expectations of what firefighters may do when they get in a bad spot. The theory of just sit still and wait for somebody to come help you is kind of out the window nowadays, only in extreme circumstances, right? So you need to know how people train as well. So this is a great program. They definitely work the crawl, walk, run side of things. And this doesn't have to be an IFF Fireground Survival program. Traditions has programs. There are a lot of people out there. There's a lot of probably subject matter experts in your own departments that have the skills and have the passion and desire to do firefighter survival skills. And that's a good thing. Use those resources and constantly revisit them. Everything that I'm talking right now are perishable skills. So if you don't keep up with it, it's like learning a language. You will absolutely lose it and you're going to become rusty. So you have to revisit these things. So you start small, you start building up, and you're going to keep it in a controlled environment. Then you're going to throw in a BA pack. Then you're going to block out your visibility. Then you can start jumping out of second floor windows, doing rope bailouts. And then you can do the entanglement prop and zero visibility. And this is where that crawl, walk, run really comes into play. So you start basic and then you get to the point to where you can make it real speed, real life, start troubleshooting things and then smooth things out. So just bear with me. You guys are doing great. We're getting to the back end here. We just got a couple points I need to hit and we'll start to close this out. So this is my probably second favorite quote. Stronger people are harder to kill and are more useful in general. And that is so paramount in the fire service. I've heard people tell me that, oh, my adrenaline will get me through. I don't need to train. And I've had people literally tell me, I work more efficiently than you because I'm more senior than you. Some of that's true. I just said, like we just talked about, your adrenaline can make you more successful if you've trained for it. You may work more efficiently if you're more senior, but that's only if you've kept up with your skills and you haven't let them perish. If you're the 30-year person that's only repeated your recruit year 30 times over, you are no good to me. This is a constant thing. I need to see the 30-year captain in turnout gear with the rest of his firefighters doing the same skills. But from the physical side of it, we know that cardiac arrests account for 50% of our line of duty deaths. We are occupational athletes. If you're somebody who's a power lifter, that's fantastic. You have a good strength base. But if you can run a flight of steps and you're out of breath, there's a hole in your fitness. And if you're a marathon runner, your cardio base is fantastic. But if you can't deadlift your own body weight, that's a huge issue as well. So we need both those two worlds to come together. So let me show you that in real firefighter terms. Again, this is from Project Mayday. This is a real life BA graph taken from a Mayday event where the first 50% of their cylinder was taken up just by doing typical fireground work in that 8 minutes of working time. You can see here where the steep drop off is. This happens 8 minutes into his usage and the floor collapse happens. That remaining 3 minutes, because of physical and emotional stress goes through the roof, gets drained. The other 50%, when it took 8 minutes to take care of, now it's done in 3 minutes. The entire cylinder was emptied in 11 minutes. And this is pretty typical for a Mayday event, talking to BA techs. Now, this is a CBA or consumption graph from one of the units on scene at Woodscape. The only point I'm trying to drive home when you look at this graph is every time you see a drop, this is a typical fireground task that is being required of this person. This is not to hammer this person at all. This is incredibly typical for what you see in the fire service. But these could be things as simple as pulling a hose line. Okay, I'm forcing the door. I'm going in the door. I'm searching around a little bit. I'm going to come back out. I'm going to bring the line around this way. I'm booking over to here. I'm researching again. I'm mapping the room. But basically, anytime any task is asked of this person, noticeable drop in air. Okay, so keep that in your mind. 25% of the total air loss was done in about 6 minutes. Now, this is done over a longer period of time. You can see where this person even switched out bottles. That's all good things, but we need to bring our physical wellness and metabolic prowess up. So let me show you some other stuff here. I'm on the left. Firefighter Andy Hoffman is on the right. This first little dip for me is when I tried to go in through side alpha. I was told to hold up. This is when we tried to go inside Charlie after the Mayday, and we were told to hold up. And from this point here, we have a nice steady 45-degree angle from when we went inside. We had to map the room. We had to get into the crawl space and experience the entanglement, experience near flashover conditions, experience pulling Flynn 30 feet through rubble to get him back out, getting back out through the structure. And Andy Hoffman is the same way, a nice, just clean decrease in air. So we had all these tasks required of us, and it's just a nice steady drop. And that's because of our training. When I'm operating at 95% of my max perceived effort, one of the hardest things I've ever had to do, and where my adrenaline just got me completely shot for the next 2 weeks, I had a noticeable decrease in air that was nice and clean. And that probably allowed us to work harder and work longer. And that's because of what we were able to accomplish. And that's where we get into the physical fitness side even deeper. For the previous, so I've been a certified trader since 2011. CrossFit is like my main thing. I'm certified in other things, neither here nor there. The guys at work, we've trained in that high intensity interval training style of training. And basically what I want you to take from that is we're doing and performing movements really quickly. And that's more reminiscent of what we see on the fire ground. If you're pounding the treadmill, that's good. I need you to get a little bit more in depth with what we do. And if you're somebody who's deadlifting every day, that's fantastic. You got a great base, but I need you to be able to do some things quicker. So we need to have these functional movements. And functional movements are really unique in their ability to generate power. And we need to generate power in the fire service. When we have 50 to 75, upwards of 100 pounds of gear on us or that we're carrying, we have to carry out our down firefighter buddy. We need to move large loads, long distances very quickly. Think of like the outside vent person dragging ladders and tools to get around side Charlie of a garden apartment. A hamstring curl and an elliptical is not going to provide you the same stimulus. So kind of the coin terms in the industry is we specialize and not specializing. Our fitness needs to be broad, general, and inclusive. We need to do a lot of things that are reminiscent of the fire ground. That's where deadlifts and tire flips and we need to have the cardio side of it. We need to be able to run and pound pavement, but they need to be more reminiscent of what we do outside in the fire ground. So we see here, these are just pathways. We want to work the anaerobic pathway system. Aerobic pathway system is when you're using oxygen. So that's the marathon runner, right? The anaerobic side is using the natural occurring sugars and phosphagen, the creatine in your body to power the workouts. You can't go as long. This isn't like you're pounding pavement for an hour run, but you're producing a lot more power. So this is how you have to work out to get that result on the back end. And the cool thing about this is that anaerobic pathway training trains aerobic, but aerobic does not cleanly train anaerobic. So what that means is that a marathon runner, that's their one thing that they do. But when you look at gymnasts, when you look at CrossFit athletes, when you're looking at Olympic sprinters like decathletes and pentathletes that are multi-sport, you can drop them in any other sport and they're going to do pretty well. Marathon runners can only marathon run, and deadlifters can pretty much only deadlift, right? It's when you need that well-versed firefighter that, like the utility fielder, they need to be dropped in any role and be able to physically perform. So that's what we're looking for. So these are just common examples of programming. Instead of just doing your bicep curls and running on the elliptical or whatever, this is a workout where you have the round set and you need to complete the work as fast as you can. So this is like a fire with a rescue. You need to get in there and get that person out. This is where, hey, I have this much work I can do on my cylinder. How much work can I get done inside of that? So now our time domain is set. I need to get as much work done within that time domain as I can. And this is another style of workout. It's called a chipper. This is where you can't move the one movement until you finish the previous one. And you only go through once, but you need to complete each task before moving on to the next one. So these workouts are more reminiscent of what we're doing in the fire service. And this is how we need to be physically training on top of our like workplace occupational training. Basically, we need to build our work capacity. We need to get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Last couple slides and we'll start tying things up. Last thing I'm going to hit is reading. So General Mattis, just Mad Dog, great guy. You can read the quote, but basically he says, if you haven't read hundreds of books, you are functionally illiterate and you will be incompetent because your personal experiences alone aren't broad enough to sustain you. Hopefully some of you have experienced Andy Frederick's training days, fantastic training event that's been going around for quite a while. And I remember listening to John Salko speak, and a young guy in the front row said, hey, Chief, what books do I need to be reading? And the entire crowd just burst into laughter because we're firefighters. We need to do hands-on stuff. We need to get out there and pull lines. And I thought it was kind of ironic because we're all sitting there in a lecture class when he gets laughed at. I remember thinking, yes, we absolutely need to be in the gym and we need to be working out and we need to be in our gear and get comfortable in our gear and work the sets and reps and pull lines and throw ladders. But not everybody has that ability. And so when you can learn from other people, you're going to create more experiences for yourself by living through others. The simple answer is NIOSH reports, right? And near miss reports. But we can go further than that. If we have information, you basically know the internal dialogue of another firefighter when they're in a stressful situation. And this can be done in so many different ways. Like I said, there's a lot of trade side things that we can do. Some of my favorite ones are these four right here. On combat, this is where I got a lot of the data on the physiological effects of being under stress when you're in a life or death situation. So fantastic information. It centers more around military and police, but we can glean a lot of great info from it. In extremist leadership is they follow teams that put themselves in life and death situations. So it is a lot of military, but they find out why these teams are successful. And one of the biggest components of that is competence in your skills. If you're not competent in your skills, the person to the left and right of you are not going to trust you. You can be the coolest guy out there. You can have the greatest gear. You can be the funniest person around the coffee table. But if you're not competent in your skills, you are not going to instill trust in the people around you, and you are a liability. Deep survival, I think this is really starting to get popular. I've read this book probably 4 times now. It really researches the physiological responses to stressful situations and the decision-making processes that happen to affect whether people live or die. A lot of it comes down to having small, actionable goals and working towards small things and not letting the overarching big picture come and like have you withdraw. And that's what happened at Woodscape. We had small, actionable goals. We always progressed. We always overcame them. And then we worried about the next thing. If we worried about everything happening all at once, we would just go into sensory overload. Culture Code is a great one. It talks about sports teams and successful organizations and how they've built their culture and how you talk to each other. So you can be an all-star, but if you don't know how to talk to the person next to you and you don't know, maybe you're the officer, maybe you're the senior firefighter, if you don't know how to truly cultivate the team, that's a hole in overall team performance. There's another one right now, Chop Wood, Carry Water by Josh Medcalf. It's basically enjoying the process of becoming great through starting with basics and starting with the recruit style mindset and then building up and trying to achieve mastery, which is like an ever attaining goal, right? It should be. My crew at work, they're fantastic. They're totally appeasing me, but we do like a little book study, some of the shifts on some of the chapters in it. And it's hard work. It's consistency. It's discipline. But that's what we need to get out of these things. So you can get so much from just reading literature, and you can get training ideas. So our minds can't sit idle. There's so much free information in podcasts that I don't even know where to begin. These are a couple of my favorite. Situational Awareness Matters. These are just fireground stories of near misses, and Mayday events and how personnel get into or out of bad situations. Real life calls. I've learned a ton. And it's one of those things, well, wow, this really can happen to you. And it's changed my mindset. It's given me training scenarios that I can work with my crew. Jocko podcast. Some people love him or hate him. If for nothing else, he brings on some amazing people where you have Medal of Honor recipients. You have military members that have been seriously injured. You have family members that have experienced a line of duty death. You do a case study on a horrific war event, and you learn through people's struggle. And like I said before, struggle is okay. Struggle is good because it's going to make you mentally and physically stronger. And so there's a ton of information that can be gleaned from other industries, especially the paramilitary ones. And optimizing human performance, just a great guy from FDNY, former Marine. They talk about building cohesive teams, becoming a stronger individual, overcoming adversity, and they bring on subject matter experts in their own fields, like sports psychologists, firefighters, Navy SEALs, and they have a ton of great information and they make it real. And there's a lot of job specific ones too. There's Fit to Fight Fire, there's Journeyman Firefighter, there's engine hose training, there's RIT nerds. There's a ton of free information. I don't mean to leave anybody out, but there's so much free information. There's no reason why we shouldn't be benefiting from them. You know, when we're out on a 30-minute drive going to and from, you know, we can benefit from it. So, wrapping things up, treat every call as if it's real. Don't ever apologize for it. Put hose in the street, throw ladders, get comfortable in your gear. Make training as realistic as possible. It's okay to be stressed. But when you're done that, take off the gear, get in the weight room, do some good stuff. I can't thank these men and women that I'm surrounded with enough. I'm just a spokesperson for them tonight. They all have their own stories of what happened that night. And like I said, this is also their story. They're an amazing group. They're an amazing team. And I'm nothing without them. This is kind of our unofficial motto: humble, hungry, and emotional intelligence. I took it from Patrick Lenciani, the Ideal Team player. But you can have all those things at play. If you're not humble and you're an arrogant asshole, sorry for my language, you're going to bring the team down. You can have that one negative person, they're going to bring the team down. We have to be passionate for this job, being hungry for the job. And there's days when we have our off days, and I get it. That's okay. We need to bring each other up, but you still need to have the discipline to say, I know I'm not in the mood today, but I'm still going to do it because it still matters to the guy to the left and right of me. And then emotional intelligence, we're going to hit some emotional events, but if you don't have the bedside manner to be able to talk to your people, like I said, if you have the negative attitude, you can be an all-star. But if you're going to bring your people down, it just takes one person. It's going to destroy that team. So, like I said, I'm just the spokesperson for the guys. I can't thank Traditions Training enough. Everybody for spending your Tuesday night listening to me jabber for a little bit. Let me try to. Let me see if I can bring my video back in so you can see my ugly mug. Yeah, I just really appreciate everybody coming in, and just thank you to Traditions. Thank you to my team, and hopefully you guys learned something out of this. My email is joshburchick@gmail.com. You can find me on Facebook if you have questions, if you need clarification on anything. But yeah, just really appreciate the opportunity to speak, and hopefully you guys got something out of it. So thank you. That's all I got.
Josh, can you hear me?
I can.
All right, man. Fantastic job, man. Fantastic job. The amount of Q&A and the text messages and everything you just did a phenomenal job. So everybody's truly impressed, and obviously it's not the best story, but you presented it extremely well, and I think it's got a lot of good learning points in it. So we do got a couple questions that we need to ask real quick. I know we've been on for a little bit of time here, but so there was some confusion about the hole that Lieutenant Flynn fell through. You made it sound like it was a hole that was not there because of fire, but because for some other reason. Can you clarify what this hole was?
Yeah, sorry if that was confusing.
That's all right.
So what I meant was that the hole was already there because of the fire and where it started in that location and burned away all the structural members. It was not Flynn did not crawl over and then the floor collapsed. The hole was already there and he fell into it.
Okay, gotcha. So hopefully we got that one. Another question was, somebody was curious if once you guys entered from side Charlie and were making your way to that void space, were you flowing any water in the basement?
No, there was no active fire, and there was no fire seen until we actually got into the crawl space. So we hit that that half set of steps, once we were in that crawl space of the block walls and all the storage, that's when we actually found fire, and that's when House and Dreamy started actually flowing water.
Okay. And there was a question about the void space. I mean, I think from our previous conversations, that void space was not recognized. Not that anybody could, for that matter, but I mean, you guys just kind of happened upon it, or how did we recognize this void space? I guess.
Yeah, no, we had no idea what we were getting into until we were already in it. We never got any inclination from the homeowners, and homeowners aren't thinking like firefighters. They're giving information to certain officers about, hey, there's nobody in the home, and I do have smoke in the basement, or I see smoke here or there. They're not thinking of, oh, it's going to be an issue if they get into a crawl space with a bunch of storage in it. So no, we had no indication. We had no idea what we were in there. In fact, I got to applaud our department. They did a fantastic job after this line of duty death occurred. Right immediately after, they started bringing every single crew through to do a walk around of the structure. And before, there were some areas in the house that were so large that you had step downs from a foyer into a kitchen into like a breakfast area. And we thought it may have been just a step down. We thought we had maybe made it back to the main level. And we didn't realize what we were in until the following days, when we were able to go back to the scene and see the crawl space and see the structure and see what we were actually in. We had no idea.
Okay, because I remember they had to shore that whole thing up, right? I mean, it was.
It did. Yeah, we had to bring special ops teams in. We have a fantastic SO team, and we had a lot of help from other agencies. And yeah, they had to shore everything up and bring things out piece by piece. With ATF and state fire marshals, did a fantastic job helping us out. But yeah, they had to shore it up because it went multiple alarms, and they were putting water into that place for hours into the next day.
Okay. I don't know if you know the answer to this one. I wrote it down because it was one of the first questions. I'm sure you were preoccupied with your radio traffic. Were you guys were initially sent to Side Alpha, and you were the on-deck company, and then you were deployed as the RIT team. Do they automatically backfill the on-deck?
Typically under the blue card model, they would. You're always supposed to be 3 deep. Again, we don't operate under that model anymore, but yes, they typically would. But because things were so rapidly escalating, they didn't put anybody back on deck once the Mayday occurred. Once we were formally assigned RIT on Side Charlie and we entered, they did very quickly make up a secondary RIT team with units from 6, 9, I believe 3. Forgive me if I misspoke, but I know 6 and 9 were there. I think maybe 2. They did make up a secondary RIT team.
Okay, I think those were our major ones. There was apparently there were some people from Howard County on, and we're answering a couple questions. We had a lot of questions about the blue card stuff. So, but I would defer that to the Howard County people, not to answer about that. So,
yeah, like I said, we don't use that model anymore, and I'll just leave it at that.
Okay. Billy Goldfeder wants to talk to you about that. So.
It's all good.
I told him I'd give him your email.
You're right. Yeah, we'll have a talk.
I said, I'm not speaking for the lieutenant. So
no, I'll flick the book to somebody else anyway.
So that was pretty much a lot of the questions. So
okay, great.
I mean, I think you covered so much information. You did so well that it lowered the questions. So great job. Unbelievable job.
I appreciate it. Again, thanks everybody for tuning in on a Tuesday, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to speak. And thanks to my department for supporting me, and Banneker Fire. The people I get to work with are absolutely amazing people. So we take care of each other. I appreciate them as well.
Yeah, and we greatly appreciate you letting us doing that on our platform here, and we're very humbled by that. So as we end this one, next week, next Tuesday at 7:30 is we're going to do an engine company review. It's going to be done by Roger Stager of Engine 8 from Baltimore City, home of the wire, down there on the west side. So very, very busy engine company, lots of fire duty, along with Lieutenant Danny Doyle from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, home of the 2.5. So the two great engine guys are going to get on here and talk about engine company stuff next week. So that's where we're going to be next week. I want to appreciate everyone that signed on. We apologize for the people that could not get on. Zoom limited us to 1,000 people. I think everybody wanted to hear Josh's story and his station story and department story, but we just couldn't. It was $900 to get over 1,000. We didn't quite have all that money for tonight. So, but we're going to talk with Josh and how we're going to maybe present this later on, but we'll have those discussions later on. So from all of us at Traditions Training, we appreciate you being with us. Once again, get through this pandemic. Let's get back to doing more fire talk and going to fires and talking about that stuff, and we'll go from there. So thank you all from Traditions Training. And as always, stay combat ready.